Well, we've talked about that on an earlier episode, where when you get endorsed or you get your rating to be an instrument a pilot, nowadays people are, like you said, they have the Avondale system, they got the G1000 system, and so they're on a glass cockpit, which is great if you want to progress to an airline career, because you're not going to have to relearn a scan per se. But that endorsement says that you can fly any aircraft on a non-commercial level on your initial private instrument in an instrument IFR scenario in IMC conditions. And so what is stopping you? You've done all your training in a modern, like say a Cirrus or a 172 with the G1000 in it. And now you've got your rated, and now you have a buddy over there at the airport and says, "Hey man, let's go take my my VTail Bonanza and go down to a quick flight 200 miles away for lunch." And you're like, "Great, but the weather's kind of sucky, so let's go IFR." "Oh, I'm IFR rated, great." And you get in there, and it's a traditional 6-pack with no GPS, VOR receivers, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, I could do this." No, no. So I know that I've had a few friends with the FAA that have been talking about changing the way they're certifying pilots with instrument ratings. There was talk about you have to get your traditional 6-pack add-on or the glass interpretation of instrument add-on after you get your initial. That hasn't really come to fruition yet, because I don't think there's been enough call for that, because it's kind of pilots are really good about knowing their limits,
right,
in general. So there is that, and plus, airplanes are expensive, so no one's going to just say, "Hey, get in my airplane, no problem, go ahead," knowing that, well, do you have experience in this aircraft? Well, no. Okay, so there is that, but it is a very dangerous thing, and that's something that I really like the Squawk Ident listeners to understand. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's safe. So, but it's great that you were pushed into learning the old school way, the hard way of doing things first, because that really built a very strong foundation of your knowledge.
Yes,
to build on.
And that's part of the things that I tell a lot of the newer pilots, the newer generation, is private pilot, go do a 6-pack. Sorry about that, Tony. Private pilot, go do it in a 6-pack instrument. Do it in your 6-pack. It's much easier to learn glass after you get your instrument rating in a 6-pack or your private in a 6-pack than it is going from a G1000 down to a 6-pack. So it will benefit you in a long run, because let's be honest, a lot of these newer airplanes now, a lot of these newer GA airplanes now are very expensive. So the average Joe isn't going to go out and spend $500,000 for a brand new G1000 172. You're going to go spend it on a 60s, 70, maybe even an 80s model, which guess what is a 6-pack.
Right. Nav 2 package, Cessna 172,
exactly.
SP, baby.
Yeah, let's go. So that's what I tell everybody nowadays. It will benefit you in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. So here you are. You built your earliest memories with your father and your private pilot quest, to get your ratings. And so we kind of really talked about what planted the seed is. You've come from a family. You were engulfed in the industry, in the culture of aviation, and you got up to your first solo, which is a very traumatic experience, whether it goes perfectly or not so much. And I remember my first solo. I mean, every aviator, you ask them, even 30, even 40 years down the road, do you remember your first solo? Absolutely. Most of them can tell you the N number of the aircraft, the airport, the time of day, the date. It's a very traumatic experience. And I mean that, in a positive way, but it's very nerve-wracking. Do you remember your first solo? How was it for you?
Yes, I do. So I soloed on my 16th birthday. I soloed before I went and got my driver's license, so I have something to say about that. I remember it. Front just came through that evening. I didn't think I was going to be able to do it, but front came through, and we just went out to the airport, and Dad and I started flying. Then all of a sudden, he got out. Said, "You feel comfortable going?" And sure. So went around the patch, Northwest Regional 52 Foxtrot, which is 3,500 foot by 40. Obstacles, trees on the south side, and a big hill on the north side. So it's makes a lot of people nervous, but I flew in and out of there a lot, so I felt very comfortable, and got out and did my I told him instead of doing touch and goes, I'm going to do stop and goes at that point. And that's what I did. I went around the pattern, came out, did stop, taxied back, and took off again. I think I did 4 or 5 of them before I taxied it back to the hangar. And there were my family was there. Another mentor was there that I flew with him quite a bit. John Willison, and had a cake for me, and I cut my shirt off and wrote the date in, and it was a unbelievable experience and memory for me.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. And so most people don't understand that when you do your first solo, your training's not over. You have to do quite a bit of training. You do your first. What's the minimum on a first solo? I don't even know anymore. Is it 10 hours or 15 hours, something like that?
Yeah, I think it might be 10. I'm not 100% sure. It's been so long ago, and I know the regs have changed a little bit, and it depends on the school and their insurance and everything, but I believe it's about 10.
Yeah. So here you are with a dozen hours or so, and you go and you do your first solo. It's very nerve-wracking, even for your instructor always.
Right.
I've been that instructor, so yeah, I know how that goes. And we did a show with actually my very first solo endorsement, who is now a Legacy Airlines FO, Jean-Michael. Yeah, so go back and take a look at that one. That's I cut his T-shirt, and like you said, you write the date on it and a little drawing of the airplane. And
the biggest feeling with that is you don't know what's coming. You don't know what's coming. All of a sudden, the instructor's getting out of the airplane. They're at the end of the runway, or middle. Hey, stop here on the taxiway and getting out. And where are you going? Oh, you get to take it around the patch.
Yeah.
So
that's the best way to do it, because if you get so nervous, you don't sleep the night before. So much pressure. So that's always the best way to do it. And I remember with some of my students, they're like, "Am I going to solo tomorrow?" I'm like, "No, probably not. I don't know if I feel comfortable yet." And then they'd show up, and in the middle of the lesson, you're like, "All right, let's do a stop over here, and I want you to pull off the side." "Okay, I'm going to get out. Here's my radio. Go ahead, go for it." Like, "What? Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, now you can have fun."
Yep. I won't make you nervous.
Yeah. And so your flight training went on. What were some of the biggest challenges with that initial rating?
Finding an instructor, to be honest with you. Besides the father, him and I got the typical father-son deal during about anything. You get in a little feud about something, but just find an instructor, because when I was learning how to fly, right after 9/11, so there wasn't a whole lot of flying going on.
Yeah, 2001 was a very tough time to fly anything.
And the instructors couldn't find an instructor because nobody was flying. So that was just it. So I found a few older retired guys that were happy to work with me. And it was funny. Everybody we were talking to about it told my dad, like, "Why is he getting into aviation? He's not going to have a job." I was like, "Well, people have to retire, and we're going to get through this at some point. Just don't know when, and now's the time to do it." So just kept on trucking with it.
Yeah. And did you get your private by the time you graduated from high school?
Yes. Yep. Got it 17, around my 17th birthday.
Yeah.
And then right after the private, airplane partner, Rob Bowen at that time in the 172, my dad and him were going back and forth about a twin to start traveling the country per se. Instead of the $100 hamburger, it was the $200 hamburger.
Right.
But so went and did my private multi add-on right after that, and then bought the airplane in 2008, the Baron in 55 Baron 2008, and went and mainly did the instrument in that airplane in the Baron, and then right after that, I think. Yeah, I knocked out both of those 17, and then right when I turned 18, I went and did my commercial multi,
Yeah.
and then a follow up with the commercial single add-on shortly after that.
And the steps you took is very interesting, because a lot of times, especially Part 141 schools, they'll have you do your private single, private instrument single, then they'll have you come back and do your private multi instrument, then they'll have you come back, do your commercial single, commercial multi, instrument, all this stuff. And you're like, wow, this is a lot of money in ratings. And I think the path you took is the path that I usually try to recommend people to do, is to do the add-on with the multi right away. Is really a good cost savings, and it's great experience with the multi-engine airplane right away. You get to do all the VMC information demos. You get into, because most multis are going to be complex, so you're dealing with a lot all at once, and then it's kind of easier to go back and just do your instrument, because and your time billing in your multi, which is really the key to get a job, is you need multi-engine time. So the fact that you had a father and your father's friend that were partners on this Baron, that you could build time in and do your cross countries in, and time building really was a wonderful, intelligent way to do it.
Yep.
I highly encourage people to research that before they just go to some flight school, get a loan or throw them a bunch of money and say, okay, I'm ready. Tell me what to do. Well, do the research, because there's other ways to do it.
There's
And I
other
think,
ways to do it, and what I at the flight schools for multi-engine time per hour, depending on the airplane, it's anywhere from 300 to 600 an hour just to rent the airplane. So
right,
at that point, if you can find, there's a lot of older twins out nowadays that you can get for cheap, and if you get a few partners, a partner or two in it, and split the cost, and then put gas in it, you're going to be well on top than going and spending $5,000 to $7,000 for multi-engine time.
right,
So you may as well get something out of the deal, and
right.
fly to $200 hamburger somewhere, and take the family somewhere, or a little short weekend getaway trip. So there's always a plus, and then when you're ready to sell it, you got to look at it as an investment. A lot of them, they're like cars. Most of them will hold their value depending on what you put into it, but at the end of the day, you still got to put money into it in order to hold that value.
Right.
So you're spending some money, but at the end of the day, it was well worth doing it.
Yeah, it's like a boat. It's a money pit, but when you're getting something out of it, like time building and flight training, then you can turn around and sell it, or sell out of your partnership. So there's other ways of doing things. I just want to make that clear.